I will now introduce to you the chair of today's session. As you all know, Mark Howes is the director of CCG, a principal research fellow at Imperial College London, and also a lecturer at Loughborough. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you so much for the brilliant panel, and looking forward to this session very much, including the launch of the report. The panelists are going to have a few minutes to make introductory remarks and a speech lasting about 10 minutes each. Then we'll have a launch of the report and then follow on with some questions and so on. And if I could just remind folk to please use Slido to ask questions. If you're online and watching, the Slido details will be on the YouTube channel. So we'd like to start off with Mr. Barrón Sonasin. He is the director of the Department of Finance, Planning and Finance in the Lao Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. It's a privilege and an honor to have you here, and also to be involved and engaging in work together in partnership. Over to you.
Thank you. Would say that this is very nice for me to be among you today, and it's my great pleasure and honor as today's should be a big day for us for the launchings of the report, focusing on my countries, especially the green industries that we try to look at the resource efficiency. First of all, again, I would like to also thank our colleagues from UK and governments and our GGGIs and also the research teams to support this work. And as you may know, that Lao, it's least developed countries, and also we heavily relies on the natural resources and industries sectors has been the main sectors that drive the economic developments in our countries. And I think that many countries, especially the developing worlds and the least developed country, we quite have problems on the resource use efficiency, especially the waste that created from the industry sectors. The studies that conducted jointly with the GGI teams in Laos and also my fellow ministries of industry and commerce have started to collect data, which is, I think I would consider is the first ever data that we collect about the resource use in the industry sectors. So it is a very valuable data that we hope it can provide a basics for future studies and also provide a platform for our works in greening our industry sector. I think that the most important parts of our work should be continued, especially how we can further coordinate with other relevant different partners and also agency. The work that we have conducted with our GGIs and also our colleague from UK, it's about also partly using our readiness budget under the Green Climate Funds. I personally serve as also the GCF NDA for Laos and also the Global Environment Facility operational for COP. We try to channelize the resource to support this as a basics for our future work. So again, thank you very much for support from our UKs and our GGIs and other colleagues in supporting this work happens, and finally we get the reports on which first focus on now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. So next I'd like to hand over to Helena McLeod, who's the Deputy Director General of the Green Growth Institute. Helena.
Thank you. Look, it's wonderful to be here, and it's actually wonderful to be with the DG as well. I visited a couple of months ago now. It was my first trip to Lao PDR. If you haven't been, it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and it will only get more beautiful with the work that we're talking about here and in terms of industrial energy efficiency. I want to also recognise the deep partnership we have, and I think it's one of the reasons that the opportunities like this to support our partners, like in the Lao PDR government, are successful, because the model of the Global Green Growth Institute is that we actually sit within our ministry partners and we work side by side. So we bring in our international technical advisors, our national advisors, but very much hand in collaboration with our partners like Monterey. So also, just in terms of why I think this is really exciting, energy efficiency is a win-win. And it's not all areas of the green growth transition that is a win-win. Sometimes there's a big investment, but I think the work that we've done on energy efficiency shows that you can save money, and as business, that's what business needs to do. And at the end of the day, if you save money, that does mean more growth, more jobs, and it's a win for both the environment and for the company. So that's one of the reasons I think this auditing work is very significant. We're replicating it in a number of other countries, including Cambodia, where it increases the competitiveness of not just the actual businesses, but potentially the whole sectors as well. And as we find the world is pushing towards environmental and social governance requirements, the value chains are having a lot of pressure to become more environmentally friendly and conscious. And so I think this is both good, as I've said, for the environment, but also for business and growth. I also want to thank the British government and the embassy in Laos for introducing us to CCG and helping disseminate the work. It's very significant. The more that we can get information out there as to audits like this and how the work can be done, the more it can be replicated, and that's what we all need. So as part of the project, we had about 25 different energy audits were done in Lao PDR, in the garments, agro processing and construction materials subsectors. And for all of them, I think it's shown that quite significant improvements can be made. And perhaps you'll go into a little bit more detail on that later. So just to say, we do recognise that challenges were also found. So in terms of different things, outdated technology, data limitations, they're always challenges, and obviously the lack of finance. But what we focus on in GGGI is really trying to mobilise finance, so, also trying to crowd in financiers where needed, and to also develop with the government or with the private sector innovative finance vehicles that can take the next steps forward into implementation. And for that reason, I think the ESCO approach is a very nice one. So that's all I really wanted to say. We continue to work hand in hand with our partners in Laos, and look forward to further collaborations with the UK as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd like to pick up on some of the themes that have been put forward there around national ownership and drive, deep partnership, access to readiness funds, and sort of wide international partnerships, which brings us to our next speaker, Charlotte Weston, head of the energy transitions component of the COP26 presidency and from the UK Cabinet Office. Charlotte.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me here on this panel. It's very wonderful to be with you today. So I was going to take a bit of a, as you said, more high-level international approach, and just wanted to do a quick reflection from the presidency and how that sort of marks down into what you're speaking about here today. So as I'm sure you all know, the presidency is structured in 4 goals: mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, finance and collaboration, which is why we're here today. And thanks to the commitment sort of made at COP26, we were able to keep that 1.5 story within reach, and we were keen to this year to show how that's being implemented. Oh, I think this is just... Is that better? Yeah? Okay. Where was I? 1.5 degrees. And we've really wanted to show this through the energy campaign that we've been running over the past 2 years, really. So at COP26, we saw commitments come forward through the Powering Past Coal Alliance, but also the No New Coal Compact, which was really shining a light on countries who were committing to not build more coal plants. And we were really keen to take this forward this year and work with the Egyptian presidency and now onto the UAE presidency. And this takes me on to this point of international collaboration. It's really key that we share this, all technical expertise, and financial aid that we can, and build those ecosystems of support, which is what we're seeing here today. And this is specifically shown from our presidency through the Energy Transition Council and the Rapid Response Facility, with which Lao is a partner, and we're working deeply to show that. So the bit I just wanted to touch on was how the process worked and the assistance from the UK government and development partners, and sort of to examine the problems and the barriers that we see and the progress we can make beyond that. And this was really seen in the collaboration of the National Dialogue last March. And just finally, we wanted to see the sort of development in the areas of network and market development, sustainable finance, and the build-out of renewables in Lao, and in partnership with CCG and National Grid and EY, we were able to sort of build those energy systems and modelling workshops. And just to say a bit about the future, we're really keen to go on working with our partners. So we have a mandate out till 2025 and hope to find more of these technical assistance workshops and how we can continue unlocking that cooperation to make sure we have a further clean energy transition. But I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one of the things that was noteworthy about the Energy Transitions Council and the Rapid Response Facility was the injection of a sort of agile process into technical cooperation and partnership, which just allowed for a different way of engaging in partnership and with high impact. And as one of the partners, the Climate Compatible Growth Program is just privileged and grateful to have been able to engage. So I'll hand over to Karla Cervantes Barrón, who is from Cambridge University and one of several leading researchers in the CCG program to present some of the key findings. Karla, over to you.
Thank you so much, and I have some slides which I'm sure are going to come up in a second, but while they do, I just want to take this moment to thank all of you for being here today and for making time to share this report and the findings and all the activities that can be done for Lao industry to pursue higher efficiency, and I'm excited to see where this can be taken forward. I will start by saying also a big thank you to our partners, the Global Green Growth Institute, because they definitely helped us create an amazing piece that has a lot of insights and a lot of information that can be used by companies and by the government to really increase efficiency. And they have been just absolutely fabulous. So Lao is in this amazing moment where they can use economic growth that needs to continue, especially after some of the effects, for example, of the pandemic, to increase economic activity and to do so by achieving growth. Sorry. Sorry. Yes, so achieve growth through industry, which actually drives a lot of their economic growth. So as Mr. Virana was saying, they have been pursuing a national green growth strategy, and this year there is this green industry policy that is in the works, and we are very excited about that because of all the things it can bring with it. Great. So broadly, all the sectors that were included in the research, and Helena was already referring to them, are presented here. So construction, agro processing, garment chemicals, food and beverage, they were the ones where we focused on in our report, and they were the ones that presented a lot of opportunities. We did this by conducting surveys. Yeah. It's not. Could
you manually change the slide?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so we conducted some surveys both from the GGGI and the CCG side, both on material and energy efficiency in these industries. And yes, click next as well, please. Thank you. And we also conducted on the material side some government surveys to try and gauge what the level of knowledge and what the perceptions were on accessing materials and the difficulty to do so, the barriers that were hindering progress, as well as how efficient certain devices were that were being used in industry and what practices could be changed. So the rest of my talk will just be about the findings of the report, but this is just a quick background. Next, please. There we go. One interesting finding of the easiness to acquire materials, the perception from different industries for this is shown here in this big chart, where we can see in the middle what the share was for different sectors, whether it was easy or easy, not very easy, or hard or very hard. And as you can see, the responses there are mainly focused on easy. But then there's conflicting ones that say neither easy nor hard, and then hard also have a high share. So if we look at the construction sector in particular in this chart, we see that a lot of their responses fall in many of these categories. And that's making us think that actually there are many factors that influence the easiness to acquire materials in different parts of the country, which could have to do with their location, their size, their capital. So this means that there is a lot to be done to address these issues. Next slide, please. In this case, this shows what materials are identified to be hard to acquire in the sectors as well. And we see that coal is mentioned a lot. There's wood products that are mentioned a lot. So again, this will let us imagine why these products are hard to acquire, and I'll address some of them in a second. Next slide, please. This image shows what the trade barriers identified were by the industry. And this is a lovely chart where the size of the text tells you how many times some term was mentioned. And you can see there that inflation is one of the terms that's mentioned the most. There's also exchange rate and something about material and cost. And we see some transport-related terms like shipping and logistics. So that's already hinting at some of the issues where, for example, if a company can't buy materials because of the high exchange rates, then that affects the value and the cost that they then give to consumers. Next slide, please. We also asked a similar question in government at different levels, and we saw a few different responses from there being no identifiable key barriers to explaining how there are many government initiatives that are actually helping export and import. So it's clear that the government is addressing this, and there is perhaps a way to make these perceptions be better integrated and addressing the problems that are being identified. Yes, next slide, please. There are, in this case, we have perceptions of government officials on the acquisition of the different materials that are shown on the slide to the left. And there's a myriad of them. The different colors represent whether it is hard or easy, and the different shares of those responses. And if you see that there is a dark blue color that seems to be the most common response for the different materials, which is it's relatively easy to acquire materials in Lao. Yes, sorry, next, thank you. If we compare some of these perceptions to some of the industry perceptions as well. There is some perception, for example, that perhaps specialized manufacturing materials are mostly relatively easy to obtain, and then industry was telling us, well, maybe microchips or specialized materials are not so easy to get. So there is again, like there are some perceptions that are broadly similar, and some that maybe if there was some communication between the different actors, they could be addressed and made even better for the country. Next, yes. And yeah, we see this degree of disconnect and how it can be taken forward. Now I'm going to quickly discuss some findings for the different sectors that we looked at. For the agro processing sector, we have that there is raw material availability and equipment imports which are hindering meeting demand. Examples are the corn or cassava sectors. And there are the scale of the enterprises, which is a high share of small and medium ones in Lao, maybe makes it difficult to sometimes standardize processes. And that's something that could be addressed by creating procedures and so on that could help these enterprises, because at the end of the day, they help the local producers with income. Then on the images on the right, I have some examples of equipment that were identified in energy efficiency visits that could be improved. And there's some of these examples show wood at the top that could be better stored, for example, or heat equipment that if certain actions were taken, the efficiency of them could be increased. Next slide, please. In the garment sector, I have here, in Lao is well known for garments, and a lot of their production goes to exports. And there's factories of different sizes and efficiencies that that GGGI actually visited during their energy efficiency surveys. And with information that we collected from these visits, we were able to estimate how, if there were actions taken to, for example, change heat recovery equipment or insulation or equipment like air compressors, there are certain savings that could be achieved by the sector as a whole and bring the energy use down by quite a bit, from 42 to 26 gigawatt hour per year. And that translates into cost savings for the sector as well, which in this case we estimated to be higher than $1 million per year if some of these actions were taken forward. Thank you. Next. Now we are in the construction sector, where we have, in this case, I'm showing some responses on replacement of equipment and how long it takes to do that. And if you see the reason to replace equipment shown on the left of this image, the reason is the orange one, which it refers to it was damaged or faulty, which is leading us to think that some of the replacements are happening just because it's reactive maintenance practices that are done rather than thinking about increasing efficiency. So it means there are some actions there that could address this. And if we think of the time frame on the right-hand side of the graph, we see that the yellow one is the most common response. And the yellow one means that this equipment was replaced over 10 years ago, which again tells us something about the investment that was done for the sector, and the fact that maybe some of that investment is there and is operating, but perhaps there's an opportunity to invest in other equipment now and replace what has never been replaced, which is the pink color over there, which we see for power heat equipment or heavy machinery, which is, it's present. I've mentioned some of the, thank you. I've mentioned some of these points, but another one that also came up in the energy efficiency surveys was the fact that there's sometimes a mismatch between what's known at a national level versus what's known at a local level. And in this case, for example, we found a coal power plant that was producing electricity for a cement company. And that practice is probably because it was a really easy way to generate electricity needed for production. But perhaps there are alternative fuels that can be used, but maybe this plant wasn't reported as electricity producing for the country. So there's some communication there that can occur to change to make things a bit better. In terms of other sectors, I'll quickly say that again we see that profit margins for the costs of materials are affected by foreign currencies and transport costs, which came up in other cases. And reactive maintenance is still present, again, based on the similar figure that we have there on the right, where we see, again, that the reason orange is the most common, but we do see some activities that are probably increasing factory efficiency because of the mining and energy sectors that mentioned different timings of replacement. And I also want to point out an example that we saw here because we found the use of a hydrochlorofluor, I'm going to say the name wrong, HCFC, hydrochlorofluorocarbon refrigerant, which is known to damage the ozone layer and could be easily phased out for some other that are well known to be good refrigerants as well and less of this effect. So again, lots of little things that could change things for the better. Thank you. This image shows a lot of photos that were taken from at factory visits, showing equipment, for example, without thermal insulation, or maybe it's a bit faulty, some oil leakages in the, can I point here? Probably not, it's fine. Some oil leakages, or some on the bottom left, the second photo shows salt drying, where there's some contamination from the type of drying that's been done that then affects the final production. So all of this we collected into lists of equipment that could be replaced in the report, so do please have a look at that if you are interested in this. But some of this is easy to change. Leaks can be fixed, equipment, insulation can be improved, and again, these are quick wins for the companies. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to conclude and say that there are trade barriers that we identified that are hindering material acquisition for the country. And this can be addressed in policies, which I'll discuss in a second. There's also operating practices that, as Helena was saying, could really generate immediate energy savings at no cost, or sometimes at little cost, and they would come with increased productivity for the companies, and they could have higher value that stays with them. There's equipment that can be replaced, as I showed in the photos before: motors, lights, dryers, boilers, and steam traps. And actually, if we focus on heat and electric machinery, we identified that perhaps those bring higher emission savings for Lao. Finally, yes, if awareness is raised of efficiency in different companies, it would actually bring many benefits. Thank you. And this is my final slide. I would just want to conclude by saying what kind of policy measures would be needed, and we've divided this by resource, infrastructure, and financial measures, where we see that if there's efficient appliance promotion, regulating of substances, and really thinking that material substitution can be done and putting that in policy that will bring benefits. Infrastructure, we saw that a trade barrier identified was that there were problems with transport. There is a lot of investment recently, and there has been growth in the transport sector or infrastructure in Lao at the moment, but actually there's some of that could still be improved in certain regions. And if the infrastructure uses these materials from improved energy efficient factories, then that's even better. And in terms of financial policies, we have things that need to be done at a national level, really, and try to control maybe inflation, exchange rates as much as possible. And I know this is hard, and I'm not an economist. So, yeah, the point is lessening the burden to acquire equipment. And finally, some supporting policies that can help all of these aspects, which are helping with standards and monitoring practices, doing more training on efficiency and how different practices can be done in different sectors, disseminating information at different levels so that everyone is aware of what can be changed, and really strengthening the regulatory framework so that the companies and industries are really in line with common and well-known best practices. So I will stop there and say thank you so much. That's just my thank you slide. And again, just to say thank you to all of you for being here, and I'll hand over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Karla, for presenting that really interesting report. Just a reminder to folk who are online, please ask questions using Slido. There are a number of questions that have popped up. And I'd like to start with Mr. Sonneson. So first off, thank you very much for not only working together with this partnership to produce the work, but also putting it in a place where other countries can see what you're doing, because I think this will be a very useful example for folk to follow. So thank you. Two questions. The first is, there were different partnerships. There was a political partnership with the Energy Transitions Council, and then partnerships with the research. Did you find those easy to engage in, or were there difficulties to overcome? And then the next question is, where would you like to go to next with this work, or maybe doing other work that might be supplementary or useful? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that it's very interesting questions, because we have to ask ourselves after these studies and research what we would do next. So there are two levels of our work, which is at the political level, which is influence the policy developments and improve the regulatory framework and etc. And like the research area, the level of our technical peoples that we work together can provide, I think that a scientific decision supports to the policymaker, which in the futures, I think that it links to the second question, where we should link that with our colleagues in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. They start to have a cooperation already with the GGGI and under these cooperation frameworks. I think that with the data and information we gain from the study, it can help them to provide basics for their futures development, which how to overcome that barrier, especially for the industry sector in Laos, how they can improve themselves and upgrade themselves. I think that for Laos, especially, I think that it's quite difficult of situation. In comparisons with other countries in the regions, we quite have a low competitiveness with landlocked countries' status, low economic development performance, and lack of human resource and financial instruments to support the industry sector. With this, we can identify the weakness of our sectors But of course, I have to accept that when I listen to their presentations, your presentation, it seems that a lot of issue that link together, that solving one issue will not give a desirable effects to our industry sector. So I think it's in the futures, linking that with the relevant ministry and translate it into a concrete action. At least it would help to ease the current situation, which become the barrier of our industry sector developments. Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed. I wonder, Helena, if you'd like to reflect on that specifically a little bit, but maybe you might also like to talk a little bit about the importance of trust building to as a sort of front end to be able to go in and do detailed work together.
Thank you. I always say that any work of this nature, and if we're trying to get a green growth transition in the world, it's all about people. We're all individuals at the bottom line. So having that relationship of trust and having authenticity within the way we deal with people, I think that's fundamental. I do think that having that long-term partnership rather than a fly-in, fly-out approach, so actually being in the country, sitting with the country, become more than colleagues, you become friends as well. So I do think that is very significant. But I would also like to say it is also about delivering on results. So it's not enough just to be there and to talk. It's actually to really make a difference. Country like Laos is not a high-income country, it's an LDC. So they need real action in terms of technical support, but also financial mobilisation. So trust does also come from delivering on the finance mobilisation side. So specifically on this, you've outlined some very clear actions about what needs to be done, but it still needs to be funded. So GGGI is taking very specific steps. So I think there's the work with the government on the endorsement of the Lao Green Industry Policy that will happen. But then very specifically, these results are going to be taken into a concept note that we'll develop with the government for submission to the Green Climate Fund. That's one potential source of finance. We work very closely with the GCF. We're both based in Seoul in terms of our headquarters, even though we have about 38 country offices around the world. So that's just very specific. I just want to emphasize, you have to deliver. You can't just have a relationship of talk. And I think it's so important in these negotiations this week. I mean, we can have a lot of talk, but at the end of the day, we need action. And this is a very credible way we can work with the government to try and mobilise finance so that the businesses have a little bit of a practical helping hand to get where they can get to.
Great, thank you. If I can pass on to Charlotte, and all of these questions are inspired by what's coming through on Slido at the moment from the audience. So it seems really quite interesting, this sort of process that's been followed. There was a clever political process with the ETC and the RRF, which allowed for some catalytic work to be done that potentially feeds into a GCF readiness funding application. And every country in the world pretty much has access to readiness funds, at least LMICs. And the other point is that I'll come back to the other point in a second, but do we see a pattern that could be used for scaling this kind of engagement, where there really is this sort of important agile catalysis leading to significant projects? And what would it take to scale that, to bring more countries into the fold or to take on more projects? Because this really does look like a very interesting way of bringing both the expertise together in a smart way that is completely demand-led, but also this pipeline to delivery.
Thank you. A very interesting question. I do completely agree, and this process of truly understanding the barriers and the issues faced in country, but also finding those partners and that financial support along the way to ensure it's not just a sort of a one-way street, but it's a dialogue that you're, as you said, implementing as you go, and that's what sort of this COP they're saying is all about, this implementation. On your point of scaling, it's a pretty hard one, because to make it agile, you need that sort of dedication to the resource, and to be able to roll this out in a much wider scale, you might take that agility away, which is something that you don't want to lose. So you need to find that sort of pathway. I mean, if you look on a bigger scale, you see the much bigger funding models, sort of as the JETPs, the Just Energy Transition Partnerships are showing. But they can't be delivered at the pace that programs like this are. So it's sort of finding that middle ground between the agility and the technical and the financial assistance that is built with countries, but also doing that at the rate that we need it to sort of solve this problem. Thanks.
That brings an interesting reflection about the sort of need for continuity and building the process and capacity in the process itself. Just coming back to scaling, if I may, one of the neat things that was looked at is industrial energy efficiency, and there was a reflection in the panel before this that it's interesting that there's a lot of potential interest. I want to use the word hype, but interest is fairer in green hydrogen at the moment. And part of the interest is because those investments can be ring-fenced and made financially potentially easier to de-risk than many investments. But in this case, you're looking at industrial energy efficiency, which has got a whole lot of net gains. And some of the things that were discussed and presented are also potentially things that could be scaled. Do you see the scaling of industrial energy efficiency as important, and how should we do that?
Yes, definitely. Scaling energy efficiency is a quick win because you're using the equipment that you have and just substituting maybe what doesn't work so much. But really, any emissions, for example, or investment that you locked into that equipment is there and is producing value. So if you were to increase efficiency in many other parts of the world, and there's of course a lot of work that's already been done in the past in some other contexts about this, we know that the savings, both in terms of money that then stays within the companies, or savings for users in certain cases, and there will also be emission savings, and those are huge. So, yes, efficiency is great.
Excellent. I guess the thing that's problematic about efficiency is you can't stand next to a shiny new piece of investment or other things, which is difficult. And then that relates to the environment that's needed to realize that energy efficiency, and perhaps back to yourself. What do you think is needed next to see the energy efficiency put in place? What are the specific next steps? Would you see capacity building being important, or certain kinds of partnerships?
I think that I still doubt that with the studies, which is I think that we still need to have a further elaborations on the results of the study. Why I said so, because with a specific sectors or area that we need to further elaborate on that, it can help us to see clearly the pictures of how the governments or others, partner can intervene to support that efficiency, energy efficiency. Although we consider that energy efficiency can help to help the industry gains profits from saving the energies, but of course, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes we need to put a new machines for them, for example, and who can support them. And I think that the government itself, with the current policy, need to be updated so that they can help to facilitate. If I would like to make a transition for a better efficiency, I have support from the governments or the banking sector, for example, to support that. But again, I would like to reiterate that we should focus more on the a further study so that we can see the real issue or detail. Of course, I think that this is the beginning. Our study is beginning. But in order to be able to utilize the results of the study, we need to have that in-depth data or analysis for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to say, on behalf of the Climate Compatible Growth Programme, we're very happy to be on this journey with yourselves in parts of this work together with other partners. We have 6 minutes left, so I'd like to pose a question to all of the panelists. We'll start with yourself, Charlotte, and then end up with Mr. Sokkersen. And that the question is worded a little bit differently, but it's how can COP27 and future COPs really be used to unearth these kinds of opportunities? And so many countries find it quite difficult to get going, but what can be done? What are the next steps for the bigger process?
It's a great question. I think the one thing that strikes me being at COPs and being in some of the negotiation rooms is the value of the partnerships and the ecosystems. A lot of the time, you need to get the right people in the right rooms talking about the right things and connecting that financial support, connecting that expertise. And it's not just governments, it needs to be experts on grids to help the balancing move forward. It needs to be the experts on energy efficiency having those conversations to make sure the implementation happens. Because you can say all the headline statements, but that really needs to be reinforced. And I think COP is a wonderful opportunity to sort of kickstart that each year. So I would say that's probably my 2 penneth worth.
Thank you very much. And I'd perhaps suggest that also important to have several experts in the room to think about what the long-term implications would be as well. I think sometimes there's a danger in securing investments and then, yeah, exactly. And maybe those systems aren't ready to absorb them or they create unintended consequences. So moving on to yourself, Helena. What would be good to see come out of these COPs for the type of work that GGI does and its partnerships with countries like Laos?
So look, I think scaling is absolutely possible and it should happen. If we want to keep within the 1.5 degrees, it has to happen. At the end of the day, it is about money, innovative mechanisms, so things like ways you can help the private sector implement these changes without big outlays at the beginning. We all have the problem of putting a solar panel on our roof, but it costs a lot of money. It has a nice payback, but you still have to have that money in the beginning. It's the same for a business. So putting models in place or mechanisms in place, but you still have to get money into those mechanisms. So I suggest, because we have a challenge in the world at the minute, we're coming out of COVID. Even countries on the richer side, like the UK, they have not as much money as several years ago, shall we say, and that's the same the world over because of COVID. So I do think we need to look in these negotiations about some ways of getting more money into the system. It could be a $5 charge on airline tickets. It could be some type of tax on fossil fuel returns, which we know have been really significant this year. That money can come into the system. We know how to spend it. We know how to scale with that money. But at the end of the day, we do need money. And I think the loss and damage, which has been repeated understandably by countries who are experiencing massive loss on a scale unprecedented and aren't able to bounce back quickly, we are going to have to try and find some money so that we can invest in countries to build the resilience. So yeah, those are a couple of suggestions for the negotiators. The other one I would say is green bonds. Green bonds, you've got currently 1% of the total bond market is green. If you just shifted to 3% of the bond market to be green, you've got a massive injection of many, many billions, may even be hundreds of billions. Green bonds is something that GGGI is working a lot on, and we've mobilized over about 5 billion just on green bonds. You can link it to things like energy efficiency. You can link it to whatever sector you want to. So great opportunity there as well.
Thank you very much. So finance and scaling being important, and perhaps something equally critical might be some form of corporate responsibility on the spending of that finance, given the kind of dangerous lock-ins for relatively easy wins for financiers versus what's needed in country. And it reminds me of something you said, which was that you're not an economist, so it's quite difficult to untangle this. But you are a researcher at Cambridge University, so if it's difficult for you to absorb that information quickly, I'm sure it's difficult for many others. But Karla, where to next, in your opinion, for the COPs?
There's just so much that still needs to happen, and in my view, and of course, what you have said is incredibly important, and I'm not going to repeat it. So with a new angle, I'm going to say that making the transitions occur at the pace that we need them to is important. So really trying to make that happen and get all the actors that need to be involved there, and, for example, help them to change systems and get the different jobs that will be needed for different renewable technologies or for other types of industries that are coming up. That needs to occur, and that needs to be done quickly and rationally so that it can be done, so that transition can happen.
Thank you. So good, clear project management, another very good. Mr. Sonnerson, I invite you to have the final words to close this session.
Thank you very much. I think that I expect the same from our colleagues, but in more details, I would say that from this COP27, we expect from pledgings to commitments, and the climate finance is very important. I think that most developing countries and LDC countries and Iceland country, we expect from that. Why is it so? Now it's even more difficult for us, and we need it more than we expected in the past since the COVID. Now it's post-COVID, and we need a recovery efforts for that. And the situation changed, not like in the past that we expect from the same things before the COVID happens. I think that many developing countries, LDC countries, they face a lot of problems, especially economic problems after the COVID. So in making this effort happens, the same levels that we have, the commitment that we, the pledgings and commitments that we discussed together from a numbers of COPs. Last year's COP in Glasgow, we also discussed about loss on damage and how to put the monies in the climate finance systems so that it can help to expedite the process of getting into 1.5 degree. That's come to the conclusion that's how to make the commitments and how to make it to a real financing. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So we've heard some really interesting results of some deep partnerships that look like they're going to produce some very exciting outputs, and we look forward to seeing how this goes on into the future, with the potential for scaling as well as informing the COP process. I'd like to ask everybody in the room, at least, to give our panelists a warm round of applause. Thank you very much indeed. And also like to congratulate the folk who did the study, as well as the government of Lao for being an example, putting yourselves out there for others to potentially follow, which I think is extremely valuable for processes like this. So with that, I'd like to close the session and ask for one final round of applause and hand over to our MC. So thank you.